Thank you, Matt, for setting it up, and thank you, Yuval, for inviting me here. It's a fascinating time. I mean, think of it, right? A lot of you are hardware folks. I'm representing software here from the Linux Foundation, and our roles have reversed, right? We're building hardware with a software mentality, right? Interfaces, APIs, right? Things like that. And we're building software with a hardware mentality. Modular, mix and match, things like that. So the worlds are colliding. And what I'm here to talk about is, hardware is great. It's of no use without software. Software is great, but you got to run it somewhere. So how do we bring it together, and what kind of collaboration will really help move this industry forward? So Matt painted a great vision on, sort of the landscape of why edge, what's edge, how they think, how things come together. And I'm here to talk about, one of the initiatives we have at the Linux Foundation called LF Edge, which is really uniting multiple segments, and I'll walk you through that in a bit. Before I go into edge, just a quick word on LF. Linux Foundation is a lot more than Linux these days, if you have not already noticed. We host projects in the areas of security, in the area of networking. I mean, today's over 70% of the global subscribers, mobile subscribers in telecom, they are using open source from the Linux Foundation, specifically projects like ONAP and things like that. We host the cloud. We are the host for Kubernetes, if you've heard that software term. Automotive-grade Linux, blockchain, obviously Edge, which I'll talk about today. So we're much more than that. We host projects. We bring the communities together to create the largest shared software IP that people can use it into products and reap profit out of it. So that's a quick word on LF. What are we doing in Edge? So in January, we announced something called LF Edge, which is kind of an umbrella of software projects that make up the edge plumbing. And I hate to use the word plumbing, but that's the reality. Anything that requires reinvention of the same life cycle software is overhead on vendors and end users. Everybody does not need to start, stop, log, do lifecycle management of software processes differently. There's no value add, there's no differentiation. That's the sweet spot, and there's a lot of code there, right? So we launched something for LF Edge, which really has one ambition, and that is bring these four markets together from a framework perspective. The IoT folks are doing it one way, the cloud guys are doing it another way for the edge, the telcos are doing it another way, and then enterprises are doing it another way. Can we bring these frameworks together and unify and harmonize them from a software perspective so that we can move this market forward? And so that is the mission. And obviously, I'm going to skip the marketing slides. And then to build on what Matt said on why now and why 2019, if you look at the bottom of this slide, 5 technologies are coming mature all at the same time, okay? There's the 5G. So that's, it's not just a better cell phone. The biggest advantage of 5G is low latency, okay? We're significantly enhancing that. So that technology is coming in place. You have applications at the edge that can be written in containers and microservices from a software perspective that really go and allow you to come up with that next innovative game or that next innovative AR/VR headset or anything else. AI is now mainstream again from a machine learning perspective, where these predictive analytics can help you, stop machinery to be, bad or prevent maintenance, things like that. We're talking hardware, not just acceleration, but the consistency of hardware here is critical. And then the last piece that has just matured is the on-demand NFV, right? Matt talked about it. How does telecom service providers provide more than the pipe, more than the connectivity? And that's huge for them. So the moment these 5 technologies converge, you get a series of applications, right? Whether it's edge infrastructure, autonomous devices, immersive. I won't go into all of this. Huge market. So then the question is, what's the killer app? And so we had some surveys done by analysts, And obviously, we are in the early stages of making money here from an application perspective. I won't go into the specifics of each of these apps, but I'll summarize it into two categories. Non-traditional video, right? So it's not the YouTubes of the world, but videos that's coming from 360, coming from venues, or coming from drones, right? That category of high bandwidth applications, coupled with connected things that move, which are not cell phones, right? So just be very careful here. So it's not the YouTube and cell phone that is driving. Another way to say, it's not the human being, right? Like as Matt said. So clearly, these are the killer apps. And then we took the definition of edge, right, into verticals. And we said, okay, which verticals are going to be dominating in our community to help solve their own problem? And these are, by the way, in the order of priority. Okay, the bold ones are the focus of LF Edge. So manufacturing, oil and gas, commerce, home edge, automotives, and fleet transportation. The ones below are extremely important, but they are slow-moving markets because of regulations and policies and compliances. Okay, but they are also important. But this is where we're seeing the most traction right now. And then, of course, what's an edge? And I don't have a pretty picture of someone falling over the cliff. I have a real architecture picture that basically says, let's go all the way on the top left, which is the enterprise edge, where you have the factories and the manufacturing and whatever, to the bottom left, which is the home that we all know. Then you have the cell tower, comes into a data center, which is a smart central office, if you may. And then you have the centralized data centers that, Amazon or Azure or whatever, right? And so the key here, and this is very important, is not all IoT applications are edge applications. Just because a sensor jumps up and does analytics and shoves the data back into an Amazon data center doesn't make it an edge application, okay? We are zooming in on the definition to sort of allow for about 20 milliseconds of latency. So applications that are in that zone that require that level of latency, and it's a critical factor, is what is categorized as an edge application, right? So effectively, they're going to be in the central offices and edge all the way to the client side of things, okay? And so what are we doing in Linux Foundation? What we're doing is we're launching a series of projects, and we have 5 of these right now with a pipeline of another 10, that allow the community to develop software in each of these areas. So there's a project called Eve, or Edge Virtualization Engine. It's the software that abstracts on-prem factory devices, microcontrollers, things like that. Why should every device connect differently to, through Zigbee or Bluetooth or low power or whatever? Why should they have device drivers differently? Why should they connect to the cloud differently, right? Things like that. So that's the abstraction on the on-prem. There is the equivalent of that on the home, and that's a Samsung contribution, if you may, where the smart meters and the gas and the security and this and that, everything kind of does their lifecycle management the same way. Our anchor project is EdgeX Foundry, which is an IoT framework. So how do you get all these protocols? There's about 400 to 500 protocols, messaging buses, right? Software is just anybody can write anything and market it, right? So how do you abstract that into a gateway, proper gateway? So all of that is part of EdgeX Foundry. And then Acrano brings 2 things. Acrano project brings in the telecom use case, which we talked about, and it brings the blueprints. And for those of you who are not familiar with that term in software, we use it all the time. It's a reference solution or a reference implementation to help solve a particular use case. So a blueprint could be, take the Open19 hardware, put it inside, say, a Vapor.io sort of a data center with some hardware, load maybe an Eve and an Acrano on top, and then use it for smart cities. or use it for an industrial manufacturing site. And it's that full use case implementation, and that's a blueprint. So Akraino brings a whole set of blueprints. If you want to look at the blueprints, go to akraino.org, and then there's the blueprints inside. There's about 20 approved blueprints. Give you an example. Some of them are gaming blueprints. Some of them are connected car blueprints, et cetera, et cetera. So very heavy on that side of things, okay? From a logical perspective, here's the stack. Now, this is now clearly, you can see, a software guy is talking here. But if you see the various types of edges here, device, control, thin, thick, industrial, on-prem, telco, these projects are basically covering everything except the operating system, the hypervisor, the device provisioning, et cetera. We are not dictating, similar to Open19, we're not dictating the OS or the language or the connectivity. We're saying everything around it that makes it work needs to be based on open source so that innovation can happen faster on the top. And then the Edge Glossary project that was shown is kind of sitting across the entire stack. If you look at it from a cloud perspective and how IoT applications are being solved, it's on the left-hand side. If you have an IoT asset, you're either in an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Baidu cloud. If your manufacturing companies or factories are in China, India, US, right? You're now not able to do APIs across because each of these clouds have separate APIs. What LF Edge will be able to do is give you that open API, that common framework that allows portability and that ubiquitous edge, right? So who is really active? So this project was found with 60 founding members, and we are growing significantly. We added a lot more new members. But it's a cross-section of people. It's hardware independent, so you got ARM, Qualcomm, Intel, all of them participating. It's independent of the telcos, so you got AT&Ts and NTTs and others joining. You have the IoT and enterprise player, Dynamic, OSI Soft. You have the cloud players, Baidu, Tencent, right? Now Microsoft, et cetera, will be all collaborating. And this is the beauty of open source. Competitors and end users all collaborate to solve common problems so that they save on R&D, deployment becomes faster, right? And there's a whole series of other companies, including, Vapor is very active on this as well, okay? So then, if you put everything together, here's a diagram that will kind of, and again, I always get this joke, right? So to a hardware guy, you blow up the hardware, and then the rest of it is just a cloud here somewhere, right? To the software person, everything is blown up, and hardware is just like maybe an icon at the very bottom. It's just perception here. But you have the mobile access, the residential, and the enterprise access coming in. You have the access layer. And then the key of LF Edge and open source in general is we're not sitting in isolation, okay? We're sitting in the middle of so many other consortiums, so many other open source projects, and what end users need is more of an end-to-end solution. So you can see that you have all these edge projects that now collaborate with the core and the cloud projects like Kubernetes or ONAP or whatever. And then they have to collaborate with a set of standards. So ETSI, for those of you who are familiar, huge implementation reference specs on MEC, which is obviously very critical to this ecosystem. You have the automobile edge computing, who's an associate member. So connected cars and led by obviously Toyota. So how do you bring that with 5G in the system? You have the IIC coming in, obviously Open19. We're looking at what different ways of collaborations are possible as these data centers get built in the edge side of things. So the key message here is we are extremely excited that this is a huge market, and we're not the only game in town, but what we are solving is we're bringing the common software that is required to get edge cloud data centers running across enterprise, IoT, telecom, and the telco guys, right? And so why is, if you kind of look at it even more higher layer, at the end of the day, how do you make money? Our end users make money by selling services. They sell cloud services, Amazon, et cetera. They sell residential, enterprise, IoT, edge service. That's how they make money. And in order to do those services, there is hardware at the bottom. Whether it's a data center or a carrier or a cloud network, doesn't matter. And the area in the middle is the plumbing. And it is OpEx intensive, especially when it diverges. So our goal in the Linux Foundation is to make sure that these areas collaborate, right? How can Kubernetes and IoT interwork with LF Edge? How can ONAP and LF Edge and Crano come together? And these are actual software working groups that on a weekly basis are collaborating to make this happen. And this is kind of, if you flip it around, this is the Open19 equivalent on the software side, right? How do you standardize it without going through a laborious standards process, okay? So to wrap it up, I would say our focus is to harmonize the edge communities that are going out and creating that software layer across IoT, enterprise, cloud, and telecom. And we're keeping that framework open and interoperable, which is the most important requirement, by making it hardware independent, silicon independent, cloud independent, operating system independent, and protocol independent. And these are extremely important attributes that our community wants. And keep in mind, because of those technologies that I talked about, those 5 technologies all coming together, the edge now has significant differentiation from the past, because now you have location, you have the latency, and very soon you will have that mobility with 5G that can get you that microsecond into the connected cars, right? And obviously it's in collaboration. We're not the only one that can do this. And it's hosted as a foundation within Linux Foundation, similar to other open source communities that have been quite successful, okay? So with that said, please take a look at it, and I think we're going in for a break. I'll be here to answer any questions, and thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.